So, freelancing, close the computer now. Freelancer routines, how to communicate them with clients, and where to actually break your rules.
Welcome to Your Freelance Friends podcast. In this podcast, we're giving you tips and tricks on how to become a successful freelancer. Our goal is to help guide you through your journey and share some things we have learned along the way to save you time and headaches. We want to provide you with information that you can use for your clients to give them the most value, no matter what your niche or experience level is.
So, in today's podcast, we are going to talk about routines and how do you set your routines as a freelancer. We will also talk about communication and communicating those routines and those rules to your clients or to your future clients. And then we will talk a bit about when to actually break those rules and when you actually should break your routines. And if there's a possibility, even that situation will exist. So this is what we are going to cover, and let's begin.
Yeah, let's dive right in. So, setting your hours of operation or your availability is one of the most important things to consider when starting your freelance journey. This is going to ultimately determine your work-life balance, which everybody is looking for, their work-life balance. Now, usually your employer sets these parameters for you, right? You take a job, you say, okay, my job is now from 8 to 6 p.m. From 8 to 6 p.m., I am working. After 6 p.m., it is my time, no questions asked. As a freelancer, you're going to have to pick these yourself. And as a freelancer, you're going to have to adhere to them, which is a little harder than you may think. But this is going to be major contributor to your overall success and your overall happiness.
Well, usually I say after Rita, after you say your part, I say yes, I agree. Today I don't know what to say. When we were preparing this podcast, I need to say, we took such a long time because Rita was actually telling me those things, and I was just saying I have not implemented this. I didn't do it myself, so I don't have much to teach, but I can share my different perspective. So I actually had quite difficulties with setting boundaries for my time of work. And I think that it's because of my freelancing journey that I went through. And I never had this one type of routine or one type of schedule. Because when I started, I was traveling so much that I just needed to actually, well, feed the work in the time when I was not traveling, right? So I was just like, when I was moving and when I was on the go, I didn't have internet, so I was not working, and then I would end up working, for example, very late, and I didn't have this schedule. However, after this time of traveling, I had a stable work, a stable project, and then I was doing freelancing. So I ended up with no boundaries for my freelancing in terms of working hours because it was the nature of my work itself, I would say. But then the third step in my freelancing career, I remember I actually set those boundaries, but I set them in a way that I didn't have working hours, but I had the blocks in my schedule, in my day, right, for working. It was not always 9 to 6 or 12 to 8 or whatever. It was more within the days that I was setting, okay, so today I need to do this and I will finish at 8 or at 11. So it was not a routine, but it was some kind of controlling my hours. And I would say that in this, it's helpful to use tools such as just normal calendar and just setting up, the time blocks, or maybe some other project management tools. I don't know. What do you think about it? Do you use any, Rita?
Yeah, so I think project management tools are great in the freelancing world, especially if your life is a little bit more flexible. If you're traveling, as Anna had kind of previously highlighted, it can be a wonderful option to sort of keep your thoughts straight, your workday straight, and make sure that you're getting done the things that need to be done when you have the time or the internet availability to do so. So some tools to use, which I've used before, and I'm sure there's 100 more different ones, but these are the ones that I'm more familiar with, are Jira, ClickUp, Monday, or Trello. You can get as detailed as you want with these, or they can be as high level as you want. It's really how you want to customize it. Again, these tools can help you stay organized and not lose track of your work, especially if you're on the go, or maybe if you're just a little more disorganized in general. These can be a lifesaver.
That's true. That's true. I used a few of them also. I think ClickUp was my favorite one when I was working more as a freelancer, and then just calendar. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it's really helpful. And then all the lists, like to-do list, I always like to have. So well, those are helpful tools, but I'm just wondering how we can communicate those with clients, right? So I remember when I was getting my clients, I was starting a cooperation with clients. It was always important to communicate with them. Well, I didn't communicate the working hours, but it was always important to understand what they actually wait expect from me. So if they expect from me, for example, working in the night or be available for the call during the night, or do they expect that I will be communicating with them on WhatsApp or Skype or emails only? Do they want how much of this communication they want? And do they expect me to answer right away, even if I have a weekend or days off? So those are the things that I wanted to communicate, even if I didn't have all those boundaries for the time. I always wanted to communicate to agree on those few aspects.
Yeah, super, super important to communicate when you're available and when you're not. When you're off, you're off. Don't make a policy to take after hour calls or work weekends if this is your time off. Clients will then expect this of you going forward, and you can say goodbye to your nights and weekends. You might as well get a restaurant job at that point. You need to take the time off for yourself so you can recharge. Also, your work will suffer if you're just working 24 hours a day. It's important to adhere to a schedule. Your brain really likes it. Your brain will be happier, and your clients will be happier because your work will be of a better quality.
Yeah.
Now, of course, there is an exception to every rule. And I think that's what we're going to touch on next. But again, don't make a policy to break your own rules all the time. You're only going to shoot yourself in the foot when you do that.
Yeah, and for example, for me, I one of my rules was not working on Sunday. It's also
Mm-hmm,
because of my beliefs, my traditions in
mm-hmm,
my family.
mm-hmm,
And well, there were a few Sundays that I just there was something urgent, right? Or there was something that I needed to finish. And it just like it feels a bit bad. Like, like you're putting 100% of yourself, and you know that this is your day to recharge, right? So first, you don't rest how you are supposed to. Second, that you are not spending time as, for example, with family or friends because you're working.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
yeah, I just think that we need this time also. And however, as you mentioned, always are exceptions, right? And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes good to there's good to know when you should actually break the rule.
Right, exactly. A couple rule exceptions that for myself personally, and I'm sure for a lot of other freelancers, one is travel. Travel's a major exception, right? When you're traveling, work is sort of get in where you fit in, and a more lax schedule is perfectly acceptable here. A lot of times, you might not have internet necessarily when you need it. So this is another reason why this is a huge exception to the rule. Another one that I would say is a good exception is school. If you're school, usually your studies come first, which is totally normal, and then work comes after hours. So this is going to be another one where kind of get in where you fit in. And just, again, you're probably going to be working part-time too. So with a part-time schedule, you're going to have a little bit more flexibility. But if freelance is going to be your career, treat it as such and make a routine schedule for yourself. You will be much happier and much more successful.
Yeah, that's true. But I remember you mentioned few examples of when
Mhm.
we should actually break the rule,
Yeah.
and I have some examples from my life. So first one is when I was in Philippines and I was working, and we just got cut out of internet for 3 days straight during the
Oh my
working
gosh.
hours, like during
Oh
the
my
day.
God.
So I remember that we would be like lying on the beach, just like because we couldn't do anything else. There was like no
Such
internet.
a hard life.
Yeah, yeah, but it was also,
I
but
know.
like it was just like this feeling that the clients are waiting for something to
Of
deliver.
course.
I couldn't even communicate that actually I don't have internet, and I didn't
Mhm.
have even internet in my cell phone because it was like
Mhm.
on island and I didn't have, any connection. So it felt bad. But then in the evenings we would get internet back. So I was
Mhm.
working in the night. I remember it was like on the beds, working.
Furiously working.
Yeah, so that was an exception. And another exception is that when I went to States, I actually had clients from Europe. So I was catching their yeah, I was working with them in the late afternoon, so it was my night. No, sorry. The other way around. I was working early in the morning to catch the night with my
Mhm.
director, with the
Mhm.
client who was a director. He wanted to catch up after the whole day of working in Europe, so it was very early for me in States.
Mhm.
And then I was working in the night to catch their evenings also, like afternoons. So I remember that the schedule was crazy, but basically what I want to say here is that your change in your life or your travel cannot
Mhm.
actually impact your projects, right? Because it's
Mhm.
not the client's fault that you were traveling. So you cannot say, oh, actually, I'm traveling, so now I cannot work within the schedule that we agreed on. For 2 weeks I'm not available, right? It's like you need to know when to say no to clients, but you also need
Mhm.
to know when it's like your fault that you cannot work,
Right.
fault,
Right.
right? And you need to be
Right.
kind of flexible because, well, it's your responsibility. Even if it's maybe not even, but especially when you are a freelancer, it's not that you don't have responsibilities. When you take the project, you have responsibility. So if something changes because of you, you should still be available for a client within
Right.
what you agreed on. So this is also
Mhm.
a rule and exception from your working working time.
Right.
As
Right.
you
Yeah.
mentioned. Yeah. So I remember a few of those examples from my life when I was needed to work in crazy hours, let's say. But I also think that from time to time, it might happen that, well, business is business, and it might happen that there's something urgent. It might happen that your client actually calls in on your free day, and it might happen that they call you in the night, and there might be something super urgent. So it's also like a relationship with client. If you know that it's not going to be like routine for a client that now he will go text you and call you in the night, but it's one time situation. It's also good to take this step towards your client and just
Mhm.
help when there is an urgent need. This is like my perspective. I don't know, Rita, what you think about it, but I think,
Yeah.
well, sometimes it just happens.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I think when something is urgent and pressing, that's kind of another exception that I didn't really mention or even think about. But if you have a long-term client that all of a sudden has something come up that needs to be addressed right then and there, certainly, if you can help with that, you should, and that also will make you look better to your client, right? That you're willing to jump in right then and there. But again, time and place. It's not something we do every day for our clients.
Yeah,
It's something that we can do for a client who's been good to us and we're willing to help. But we don't want to make it a policy to do things urgently every single day at 12 a.m. or 11 p.m. when you're supposed to be off.
yeah,
But of course, yeah, something like that is definitely exception. I agree with you 100% there.
yeah. Okay, so I think we covered quite a lot today. We covered our routines, how to build them, how to communicate them with clients, and when to actually break your rules and your routines. So I
Mhm.
think this is all we wanted to cover for today. See you then.
Yeah,
Bye.
see you then. Bye.